in my mind, artificial limitations on where you will apply to is going to prevent you from potentially living your dream. Welcome to the OldPreMeds podcast. My name is Dr. Ryan Gray, your host here every week, where I take questions directly from the non-traditional pre-med discussion over at premedforums.com and answer them here on the podcast. Now, obviously, we focus on the old pre-meds, the non-traditional pre-med students, but a lot of these questions and answers will fit for most students. Today, we have a great question from someone who is active duty in the Navy. They say, hey guys, I am currently active duty Navy. I'm getting out at the end of 2020 and moving to Alaska with my family. I will be attending UAA for undergrad. My question is, what if I'm not able to relocate my family for medical school? There's only one medical school in Alaska, being WWAMI at UAA, which still requires some time at school in Washington. How horrible is it for me to only apply to one medical school? I'm very worried about not being able to go to medical school because of my location being in Alaska. I also was looking for tips from prior service members on their experiences through pre-med as prior military. Thank you for your time and consideration. All right, so interesting question here, and one that I feel comes up a lot, especially for non-traditional students who have families, students who have a spouse, a loved one, and maybe have kids who are entrenched in the school system and work and really in the social circles. COVID, I think, blew all of the social circles out of the water, so move wherever you want because we're all stuck inside anyway. So number one, thank you for your service. Number two, there's a huge risk, obviously, of only applying to one medical school. But if that's all you can do, then one is greater than zero. Now, my question would be, why are you putting, in my mind, an artificial and arbitrary barrier into saying we can't move? Because you can, it's just that you don't want to, right? Everyone can move, right? Finances, I understand finances and family support and all of that can be worked through, right? You can save up enough to move. You can figure out family moving with you potentially. You can figure out childcare and other stuff wherever you go. I'm not diminishing how hard it is to move. I'm not diminishing the cost that it is to move. But I am saying, why not? You can wait to apply to medical school so that you can move. There are lots of options, and it sounds like you're already putting a barrier in saying, I can only apply to one school, end of story. In my mind, that is more of an obstacle because there are going to be a lot of things on this path to medical school where you're going to have to be flexible. You're going to have to, like any great relationship, you're going to have to compromise. And where you live may be one of those compromises. And you may go, it's not worth the compromise. Then I say, apply to one school and see what happens. I worked with a student a few years ago who only applied to one school, didn't get in, worked with me the second time around, applied to two schools. I convinced her, apply to one more school. All right, so she applied to two schools and she got into her top choice school, the school that she had applied to before, with just some small tweaks. Is it possible? Absolutely. Her story, she didn't want to move. Her husband had a job and a great job in the area and would have been hard to relocate. And she didn't want to do it. I had another student a few years ago who lived in the kind of Hollywood and filmmaking area in this country around Los Angeles, couldn't move because her husband was in the film industry and couldn't move. And she said, you know what, I'm going to only apply to the schools within driving distance of me. If I don't get in, then we'll talk about moving. Or maybe I just move alone and my husband and kids stay and I go to medical school alone for a few years. There are lots of options. You have to start thinking outside the box. That's what will make life much easier for everyone in your life. If not even just talking about applying to medical school and where you're going to go to medical school, but just life in general. Start thinking outside the box. Why are you saying no? Why are you saying you can't? Right? Maybe it'll be hard, but you can't say you can't. I have a lot of friends who have kids that say you cannot use the word can't in this house, right? You don't say you can't do it. Say I'm having a hard time doing this. I need some help thinking about it, right? Whatever that is. So again, I'm not diminishing the fact that this is really hard. And yes, when you get out of the military and depending on how long you've been in and how many times you've moved already, your family's like, enough already. I don't want to move again. And maybe that's good enough reason for you. But applying to medical school is hard. It's competitive. The WWAMI program is competitive. And yeah, the WWAMI is not medical school in Alaska. It's the University of Washington Medical School, and they let you learn and do some stuff in Alaska, right? I don't know what the specific breakdown or split is between time, but Alaska technically doesn't have any medical schools. So that's one thing to think about is it's just really hard to get to that point where you're ready to apply to medical school, but you get to a point where you're in my mind, artificial limitations on where you will apply to is going to prevent you from potentially living your dream. And so ask yourself that. Am I willing to not be a doctor to stay in Alaska? That's really the question. Am I willing not to be a doctor just to stay in Alaska? And if you're willing to do that, great. Mazel tov. Apply to one school and cross your fingers. If you're like, no, I want to be a physician, then have those hard discussions with your family about what potential sacrifices are going to be needed to live your dream of becoming a physician and make it back to Alaska at some point. Obviously, Alaska needs physicians, and getting there won't be an issue. It's where are you going to do your training? So think about all of those things. Think about the hard discussions that you have to have with your family. Think about building relationships now with the WWAMI crew from University of Washington and see what they want and what they need and what they look for to really try to make yourself a solid candidate for their program. There are lots of options. Applying to one school isn't a death sentence. It just makes things really hard and obviously limits you and what you can do. But it's possible. I don't know if I'd recommend it, but it's definitely possible. And you are shooting yourself in the foot. Really, the heart of your question there of I am very worried about not being able to go to medical school because of my location being in Alaska. Again, are you willing to not be a physician just to be in Alaska? That's the question. All right. I hope you have a great week. I hope that was helpful for you. And I hope if you have questions, you go to premedforums.com, ask in our non-traditional pre-med discussion. And don't forget to check out Mappd, mappd.com. As this episode is coming out, Mappd is going live right around the corner. I hope to see you there. Have a great week. We'll see you next time here on the Old Premeds podcast.